Welcome to the G5 Huddle. The College Huddle is the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. The College Huddle offers its members a network of other podcasts and content creators to work with, giving other audiences more in-depth content. If you're interested in more college football coverage, then I highly recommend you go and you follow the College Huddle on X at College Huddle, our YouTube channel at the College Huddle Podcast, and visit the website, thecollegehuddle.com, where you'll find articles and information from our 70-plus college athletic focused podcasts. If you're watching us live, please hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube or retweet on Twitter. I am your host, Luke Probasco, and with me is my co-host, Justice. We are excited to be back and bring you the G5 college football content you love each and every week. Welcome, Justice.
What's going on, man? It's another beautiful Sunday evening here. A little crappy weather, raining, but it's to be expected in the spring, right?
I am jacked. You can hear it in my voice. Technically, I started vacation Friday afternoon, but the wife and I are going to Vegas to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. No kids. Don't have to worry about what we're feeding kids. We can eat when we want. I can maybe even sleep in past 6:30. Maybe. We'll see. I guess I'll be gaining an hour, so I'm probably up at 5:30, ready to go for the day.
Very, very nice. Happy anniversary too.
Thank you. I'll be sure to get some UNLV gear while I'm there.
It's been a kind of a crazy week in college football in general, and G5 is no exception to that. You've had a lot of spring game news. We won't get too much into that, but in addition to all the spring games that have kind of happened last week and this past Saturday, probably the bigger news is the transfer portal, right? Officially opened, I think, last Tuesday. A lot of changes, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't really slowed down. I actually expect it to we're going to get another big wave this week, right? With so many spring games that just happened on Saturday. So, it's wild and crazy times in college football.
And there were, a lot of rumors saying that this was going to be a big wave of transfers. And it was, in general, whether it was G5 or P4, really kind of anticlimactic. Wasn't like huge names. Coming from the G5 perspective, I think the biggest news, and we'll probably get right into it, is Utah State named a quarterback, and it maybe wasn't who we thought.
Yeah, I mean, so looking at folks entering the portal, Utah State was definitely one of the programs that I feel like was hit the hardest that first week. So they lose last year's starter in Cooper Lagasse, who started some games. They lost their true freshman who started some games last year, McKay Hillstead. And if you recall, in the offseason, the last portal period, they brought in quarterback Spencer Petras from Iowa and quarterback Bryson Barnes from Utah. So I don't know if others will see this kind of as a cautionary tale. Sometimes you have to kind of be careful what you wish for. I certainly don't believe their intention was to kind of run off either of their incumbents. I think their intention was just really more to kind of create competition in that room and maybe get some depth. And ultimately what it did is, a full swap. You got brought in two guys and you lost two more. So, I don't know. It'd be really interesting I don't know if Utah State fans would say they ended up with the better end of the deal with the two that they ended, but be interesting if you'll never hear from a coach what his true feelings were, but there'd definitely be an interesting story there to hear from them.
And out of everything that happens in the transfer portal, the quarterbacks are the weirdest, because I think in spring games you got coaches that will not name a starter in the hopes to keep you got to have a capable backup, because when you look over to the P4 and you look at Florida State, you hear defense wins championships, and we don't, they probably shouldn't make it into the college playoffs because they're on their backup quarterback. What's it matter? So you can see a lot of teams really trying to have good second options and even sometimes third options. So, you don't have that huge drop off. But then if you don't say that I'm a starter, then I'm gonna go leave some. It's like you don't give me my 4 games, just all kinds of weird stuff. And I think the transfer portal, spring games, the spring portal, going forward in years to come is going to be something interesting to see how that develops.
Speaking of backup quarterbacks, so a couple of guys that, were maybe in a competition to start spring, but my guess is they must have lost the competition because they decided to enter the portal. Uh, Quarterback Kyle Kelly from Ball State has left, kind of leaves Caden Samanza as the starting quarterback there for Ball State, and then Ike Undeegwu the third transfers out of Eastern Michigan, leaving Cole Schneider, the transfer from Buffalo, kind of as their starting quarterback. Going back to Utah State, though, in addition to the 2 quarterbacks, they lost their leading rusher from a year ago, Davon Booth, and probably the biggest, I think, the biggest hit for them, at least from a starting perspective, was defensive end Paul Fitzgerald, a redshirt freshman last year at Utah
Had like
State.
eight or
Yeah,
eight and a half
had
sacks
eight and a
last
half
year.
sacks, led them in sacks. Was a really nice looking young guy there on the edge. And to make matters worse for Utah State, not only did he enter the transfer portal, but he went to Utah, kind of in-state rival Utah. So I know a lot of Utah State folks are a little bit upset about that. And I heard rumors that at least the Utah State fans kind of thought that's where Davin Booth might end up as well. So just kind of interesting thing there from Utah State.
And we'll see how Paul Fitzgerald kind of fits into this because Utah, I believe, brings back dang near about everybody.
Well, they do lose Jonah Ellis, their star defensive end, to the NFL draft. So I'm assuming that Fitzgerald's going to slot right into that spot.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Couple other defensive losses. Probably the other biggest one would be Larry Worth, linebacker out of Jacksonville State. He had a monster game in the bowl game. He was set up to have a monster season there at Jacksonville State, starting at linebacker for them. And he announced right after, I believe it was last Saturday, sometime that he was going in the portals. That's going to be a big loss for them. Kent State also loses linebacker C.J. Harris. And then in addition to C.J. Harris, probably their biggest loss was defensive tackle C.J. West, who was kind of an all-MAC performer and it's getting all kinds of looks from the Power 5 teams. Moving back over to the offense, Sam Olson, tight end out of San Jose State. The interesting thing about him is their beat writer, like the day before he entered the portal, had kind of wrote an article about how Sam Olson was one of the leaders on the team. And so with him and receiver Nick Nash, and the next day Sam Olson's in the portal. That one doesn't really surprise me too much, just because that offense doesn't traditionally use the tight ends there with Craig Stutzman and his spread and shred. And we've read numerous articles in the offseason from that coaching staff, kind of, and the beat reporter, basically saying, hey, we got to find a way to use these tight ends. They're too good. And so my guess is, Sam Olson just kind of felt like, hey, this is probably not really going to work out for me, and so I should move on. But definitely a loss there for San Jose State, especially if they were actually going to change that offense to kind of incorporate tight ends more.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, so that's probably what Sam Olson said too, if I'm guessing. Staying with the tight end, Shane Calhoun transfers out of East Carolina. Going over to wide receiver, North Texas loses Jordan Smart, and then Nevada loses a pair of receivers. One of them, their leading wide receiver, and Dalavon Campbell and Darian Wiley. Wiley's someone else I've read, getting a couple of P4 offers. South Florida loses wide receiver Yusuf Terry, who kind of going into this time last year, most of the folks thought he would kind of be the wide receiver one in that offense, but he kind of got passed up by Sean Atkins and Naeem Simmons. And then receiver Nine Davis out of UL Monroe also entered the portal. He never really did much for UL Monroe, but he was someone I would say 2 years ago.
He was at Utah State, right?
Yeah, he was getting a little bit of buzz out of Utah State. So he's moving on. And running back Kyle Williams, I believe he's a true freshman last year out of Temple, was a pretty high recruit for Temple and someone I thought that staff was really excited about. He's decided to move on. And finally, Edge, Kyler Lang from Florida Atlantic also moves on. But, with folks departing, you get some commitments. And it's still very early in the process, so there aren't a lot of commitments made to this point. But a couple of notable ones. Tight end Corey Dyches, who was at Maryland, entered the portal, is going to go to UNC Charlotte, kind of be their starting tight end. And then Coffrey Brown, a wide receiver who originally started his career at North Carolina. I believe he's the younger brother of Diami Brown. He was at North Carolina. He transferred to South Florida. Never really did much there at South Florida. And he's also gone to Charlotte. Charlotte kind of had this kind of MO last year too. They brought in a lot of former P4, P5 guys into that room with Biff there. He has a lot of ties to the guys from the Metro DC area where he was a high school head coach, and then he went to Michigan before he come on down to Charlotte. So, Charlotte's kind of shown to, especially on the defensive side, to kind of recruit those guys. And then even this year, kind of still recruiting those guys out of the portal from the P4 and the P5.
Yeah, and then just some general college football news. We've got the 2-minute warning coming at the end of each half. Tablets on the sidelines and in-helmet communication has been approved by the NCAA for this coming season. Sideline tablets will be allowed to use video from the broadcast feed or angles from the sideline and end zone. However, the tablets will not be able to incorporate data or communications with the video. Communications will turn off 15 seconds remaining on the play clock or when the ball is snapped. If one team's communications are not working, both teams will not be able to use this device.
Similar to NFL, right? That's
similar to the NFL. How can the NCAA make more money with more ads? Hey, let's have running clocks so we can. I think they said for player safety because you could cut maybe like
that was their reasoning.
6 to 8 plays a game. And then it would also help, the games not last as long. But then let's put in this 2-minute warning so that we can do some ads and probably add that time back. The game time will still be lower, but now
overall
we can
game time. But
the
TV time hasn't changed. There's more room for additional ad revenue.
We are just years away from, and that's a first down brought to you by Manscaped. And we're gonna have in-game ads for first downs and everything.
Now in the stadium that happens. I can assure you that happens in the stadium. There's the Pepsi Blue Zone for the red zone, or somebody sponsors the sack, or all those kinds of things. That definitely happens already in game. We haven't seen it from an announcer's standpoint yet. At least from a TV anyway. So yeah, you're right.
The other part that we don't talk about because it just happened so long is good hands. We see it on every field goal on TV.
Now they do mention that on TV, the Good Hands program.
But it's like people don't really think about that as an ad generation anymore. I don't think, because they just think it's part of the game. But it's like, that was kind of, I feel like, the really first big one that they had.
Yeah, the in-helmet communications, I think, is of all these changes, that's probably the biggest one. Obviously the quarterback's going to be the guy on offense with the in-game communications, and typically it's going to be your middle linebacker. Maybe if you're playing a 4-man back or 5-man defensive backs, maybe the middle safety, but it's going to be either, most predominantly in the NFL anyway, it's a linebacker, the middle linebacker that has those communications, because they pretty much stay on the field all the time. So you kind of want that designation for that guy that's on the field all the time for the defense.
I wonder if this is really going to change anything for those offenses that are hurry ups, because they get those signs pretty quick and they're snapping the ball really, really fast. The communication might actually slow them down a little bit.
Yeah, and I wonder if we're still going to have like the crazy signs on the sideline, the Bart Simpson play, or what, where they have these different pictures or images, and they're and they're doing hand signals. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how that changes, and a lot of the talk over that particular rule change is really centered around what happened in Michigan last year and sign stealing. And if that was the impetus to get this done, then great. I think it's great. For these college players to kind of have that the same communication as far as in game with their coaches, just like we see at the professional level, and hopefully kind of improve the product a little bit. Kind of help these guys along.
All right. Well, this is actually episode 2 of the G5 College Huddle. And if you're not familiar with any of the other college huddles, they actually get these fans of teams together to just talk about their teams. And there might be 3 and 2 teams talking about each other. Well, we have our first guest. So please welcome our special guest this week, Jonathan McNamara from the JMU Sound Off Podcast to this show. Jonathan, do you want to let the viewers know a little bit about yourselves and where they can find your guys' content?
Yeah, sure. I was going to start off, though, by just saying I was listening to your portion about the sponsored first downs and stuff. I call high school football on the radio, and we've had first down sponsored by dentist's office. We've had it by local convenience stores. So if you can do it in high school sports, why not do it in college? And I can say JMU's first downs are currently sponsored by a place called Ergie's Cheesesteak. So if you're a JMU fan, you'll know that. You hear it a lot the last couple of years. It's an Ergie's Cheesesteak first down. But yeah, my name is Jonathan McNamara. I am proud to represent a podcast called JMU Sound Off. We're really a fan-led podcast that gives a perspective on JMU athletics, not just JMU football, but really tried to focus on the entire JMU athletics community. So it's been a really amazing year for our programs, from not only the football success that we had in our second year of transition, our men's basketball team winning a game in the NCAA tournament, both of our soccer programs making it to the NCAA tournament, winning games, and then what we've had recently with our spring sports, both our baseball teams knocking off the number 1 team in the country, our softball with some big wins. So a really historic year for our program, and seeing a lot of momentum, obviously seeing a lot of change, like of other G5 programs who are all navigating through this ever-changing landscape that is college athletics. But we're really fortunate to have seen tremendous support and really honored to be part of this association of podcasts really coming together to share the perspective of the Group of 5, which we're very passionate about. We're really excited to be a part of the Group of 5. Been in FCS, for people who are not familiar with JMU, at least on the football side, for many, many years. And this will be our first year that we're officially eligible for both bowl games as well as the potential G5 playoff spot. So a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement in the JMU world. All of our accounts are at JMU Soundoff, and just excited to have a great discussion tonight.
I want to know right off the bat, you guys come over to the FBS and you are not eligible for a bowl because, we want to, protect you to make sure that things are okay. And we know you've, won many, many games, but we don't want you in bowl games because, we just want to protect you. Yeah. I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, for starters, so I'm gonna already can hear what the comments will be from other fan bases around the country. Is we understand when we signed up to make the transition, we knew that there were rules in place. We knew that there was a transition period, and we went into that full-heartedly understanding that. However, you don't really have a choice. When you make that transition, it's dictated to you that you have to go through that. And let's be candid. I think, yes, I'm just like every fan base. There are homers who said, we're 11-1 in FCS. We're going to be 11-1 or undefeated in FBS. I can tell you from our show and from the majority of the fan base, we thought we would struggle in the first couple of years. We thought there would at least be a transition. We felt we matched up favorably with the Group of 5 based on our athletic budget and our previous success that we've had against Group of 5 programs in the years previous. But you don't know until you go through that first experience. It's a lot different playing one FBS game a year than it is playing 11 or 12. So for us to have the success that we had in our first year, again, even for the most optimistic of fans, was shocking. And then to do it again in year 2 was even more surprising. To find ourselves in the top 25 both years, to be one of the last remaining undefeated schools in the country. And when you have that, let's just be transparent and real. There's an economic impact that comes from being eligible for the college football playoffs, being eligible for that group of 5 spot that winded up going to Liberty. And I think the entire fan base said, hey, when you really look at these rules and why they were created, they were not created for a program like JMU that had been investing in facilities, that had made the transition the right way, making sure that we had the budget in place, that we had the support staff in place, that we had the academic support staff in place, as JMU in both of the first 2 years led the Sun Belt from an academic perspective as well. And then obviously when you're showing the college football world that you can compete, beating UVA early in the season and then running the table in the early portion of the Sun Belt schedule before we suffered a late loss to Appalachian State. I think that the proof was in the pudding. We had our attorney general involved in advocating on our behalf. And then, obviously you don't get there for a variety of different reasons. We dropped the lawsuit. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of debate around that. But I can tell you from a fan perspective now, it's just exciting to not have an asterisk next to us. I think every Group of 5 program now just wants the ability to stay relevant, to stay in the conversation, because we all know, similar to our days in the FCS, is the fans in the FCS who were passionate about those programs are passionate, but it doesn't get into the main ticker on Sports Center. It's usually not on the main sports shows that we all listen to on a regular basis. So having that asterisk removed, and now with the opportunity of an expanded playoff, to just have a shot, to just have some hope, I think that does hopefully increase, while we're still eligible for it, the interest in the Group of 5. And just like what we see in college basketball, the great thing about March Madness is you get programs that come from these smaller conferences that every year make noise. We knocked off Wisconsin in the first round of the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and then we get a chance to play Duke. Yeah, that game doesn't go well for us, but you still were on the court, and that's all you can ask for. And that's why I think all of us are excited, and I hope all fans of Group of 5 programs have a chance to just, at least in the off season and when you're getting ready in fall camp, we're all undefeated, and we all have a shot at that spot. And I hope that leads to increased TV focus on it, increased conversations on podcasts like this, and hopefully an increase in attendance and investment in these programs.
The one thing that just I don't really understand the reasoning behind the whole rule is, like, who are you really protecting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if the team themselves is good enough to do what they need to do to get to that level, what protection do they need, right?
I think as somebody who had to go through these conversations a lot during the season, the thought process behind it is you didn't want teams to make a jump for one season and try to capitalize on a
Sure.
small amount of
Yeah.
investment or something like that. Again, though, that's where you're supposed to have a process. And this is what I think the main complaint from JMU fans is, okay, your rules, not ours, not what we wanted to project, but the NCAA's bylaws and rules said that there was a review process. And this is a key point. JMU invested a significant amount of money, over $750,000 in their first season, getting a game scheduled against Middle Tennessee State. They did that for a reason, and that was so that they could have a full FBS schedule in year one of their transition. They didn't play a hybrid schedule similar to what a Sam Houston State did in their transition, and other programs before that. JMU jumped headfirst into the FBS, and that cost them money to do so. And they did that because they were given assurances that they were going to be allowed to have a 1-year transition period, and that there would be a waiver. And they were told that their chances of being basically approved on that waiver were significant. Now, there was an NCAA leadership change. A new president came in, and his perspective was that they had been too lenient on these waivers, and they did not want to set the precedent. That's what the real concern was, is that if you approve JMU, or you're going to have to approve schools like Sam Houston and others. And my point is, approve them if they're ready, evaluate them on the merits, but don't, especially in the post-COVID world where so many of these athletes lost out on so much, and there's been a rightful focus on mental health of student athletes, and you're going to give them basically put another shackle on them and say, look, your career could be end at any moment on one play. Hey, you had this great success, but we're not going to let you compete in a bowl game or compete for your conference championship. You never get that opportunity back. And that's where I think when the focus has been so much on student athletes and making sure student welfare, and when you read the mission statement and the bylaws in the NCAA, they're supposed to care about that. But let's be honest, it comes down to money, and they didn't want to have to do that payout to schools like JMU. And while you can leverage them for certain things, they didn't want to have to pay them out and then getting really petty about not even including their stats on the NCAA website was just kind of the icing on the cake. We had a player by the name of Jalen Green, who's going through the NFL draft process now, that was leading the nation before his injury in sacks, as well as tackles for a loss. And if you went on the NCAA site, he's not even listed. Obviously, that's the type of thing that got the attention of College Gameday and other analysts across the country who said this rule is outdated and unfair. And we obviously agreed. But again, the headline is we don't have to deal with that anymore. Now we just get to compete and focus on our team on the field, which is plenty of the focus on with the good things happening with our new coaching staff. And we're excited for the future.
Well, and you kind of have a little bit of poetic justice, right? With them not having enough eligible teams at the end of the day. So you guys and Jacksonville State, for that matter, both got to go to a bowl game last year.
And it was an incredible experience. I'll just say, and this was the only part about it that was really frustrating for us. And I know we're not alone in this. Other programs across the country had to deal with this. But to have the success that we have, to get named to a bowl game, and then days later, before we ever had a chance to play it, we lose our coaching staff. And we lose a significant number of contributors who played critical minutes for us at key positions, and to not have them at that bowl game, and also have the uncertainty knowing that likely significant numbers of the players who did decide to play were going to leave probably the next day, which they winded up doing. Over 10 of those players, 90% plus of JMU's production from last year headed out the door to go to Indiana. It did put a little bit of a cloud over that game, as well as the fact that we had a makeshift coaching staff, some who hadn't even called plays. We had a offensive line coach who was a current player on the team that was injured. We had some coaches that were brought in as kind of free agents for a couple of week period just to coach positions. So the fact that we were able to have as good of a showing as we did against a team that, let's just be candid, Air Force, probably one of the harder teams in the country to prepare for with the option attack that they ran. So I give the interim staff a lot of credit, but I also give the players who showed up that day a tremendous amount of credit, because they represented the university well, and again showed that this program is ready to compete for not only Sun Belt championships but potentially more over the years to come.
Jonathan, in the event that we've got just some casual fans watching, maybe not if it's springtime and they're watching the G5 College Huddle, but let's say you've got your coaching staff is left, and you've got a quarterback and wide receiver. You've got key players that are, hey, we're going to the transfer portal, and then I turn on the TV in December and I see, well, I thought that guy was in the transfer portal, and well, he's playing. Yeah. Can you talk us a little bit about how that stuff kind of works, maybe at JMU or just in general?
Yeah, so JMU made a decision, and I think it was the right decision, to say this team had gone through so much, and I think as a university that was advocating for student kind of welfare and the student athlete experience, it would have been kind of hypocritical to say, hey, you know what, you might have put yourself in the portal, but we're going to remove this bowl game opportunity for you. So at least at JMU, the decision was at that time that if you were a player, whether you were in the portal or not, and you were willing to, we're going to allow you to play in the bowl game. Now, let's also be very transparent. If JMU had made a alternative decision, they would have had a lot of holes in the lineup, just to say the least. And I think you want to, especially after the season they had and as close as this group had been, I do think it was the right decision to let them play and to let them kind of round out what was a magical season. Look, let's be honest. These guys make these decisions for a variety of different reasons, and they deserve the right to play in that bowl game. Some of these guys have given JMU many years of great contributions. They were proud Dukes who made a business decision to move on to the next level. I know personally I'm not the type of guy that's ever going to criticize a 19, 21, 22-year-old for making a move to a different school. How many of us have left jobs for different reasons? So I'm glad and proud of Jeff Bourne, the athletics administration, for allowing them to play. And I personally wish those guys well at Indiana or wherever they go on their next journey. And our mentality has been we've benefited from the portal. I mean, if you look at some of the success stories on this roster over the last couple of years, they've been portal additions to JMU. It's been very good to us. So yeah, for the players we've lost, it's disappointing, and you'd love to see them play longer as a Duke. But we've already benefited. I'll tell you, in this offseason, seeing the spring game this past weekend, some really great additions to this roster that at least when you talk to head coach Bob Chesney, which I've had the pleasure of doing some interviews with him, and he feels very good about where this roster is. He really feels he upgraded in multiple position groups. So we'll see. That will be put to the test. Obviously, August workouts, and there could be more movement as we go through this week and throughout the summer. But feel good about where we are in terms of this roster going into the fall.
One thing I'm kind of interested in hearing about, and this goes back to your FCS days. You guys are probably one of the few G5 programs that have had game day, ESPN there, on more than one occasion. Kind of what's that experience like, and like what has it done for JMU?
It's incredible. I can tell you, because it's not just, and if you're a program that hasn't had it, I give you a little background. So we've had it 3 times now in 5 years, and what it's done is just shine a light. It's a multiple day long commercial for your university, because it starts with the arrival of the ESPN crews on campus, all of the promos that ESPN does, as well as their kind of sister stations and radio outlets and other media properties that also push it. And then to have that showcase about not only what makes your football program special, but the university as a whole. You're intimately involved in the production process of how you showcase your university, what camera shots are used, where they're positioned. So you have an opportunity to really highlight what makes your school special. And for JMU, I can tell you from the metrics, JMU has been great about sharing just what the impact has been from a, media mentions, web searches for the school, applications. All of them have gone through the roof. And I know that that's a statistic that many of the schools who have had the pleasure of hosting game day have had. And we've heard from many of the hosts who have shared very publicly that JMU is one of their, if not favorite, destination. And that's why they keep coming back, because we keep breaking records in terms of the number of people who show up for these events. Pat McAfee said they'd never seen anything like it in terms of the crowd that showed up for his show. And he said this is bigger than many game day crowds that we see on a Saturday, let alone it being on a Friday afternoon. So it's something we're passionate about, something the JMU fan base wanted to make sure that we were showcasing and doing our best to highlight the school. But let's be honest, it's also because we were successful when we were undefeated at that point. So there was a lot of momentum, a lot of energy, and it just so happens the game day focus was around our biggest rival in App State now in the Sun Belt. And so there was a lot of ingredients, I think, that fit in perfectly at that time. Sometimes it's luck as well. We had great weather. And it was a beautiful day in the fall, and it shined a lot of attention on what I think all of us are so proud about the university. And I will say we're not alone in putting on a good show from the Group of 5. App State did an incredible job at their game day. Had a chance to see that. I've seen what some FCS programs, North Dakota State's game day experience was absolutely incredible when they hosted it. And I think it's good for the sport. The more Group of 5 programs that can be featured, I think the better. Because how many times can Alabama have it? How many times can Penn State or Clemson or whatever? It gets a little old, and I think it gets old for their crowds too. And that's kind of what their staff and behind the scenes have kind of said, is that once you've had it 15, 20 times or whatever, it gets old, and you have to get up early. People are camping out on the quad or wherever it's going to be showcased. So there is a little bit of a labor, and when you've seen it so many times, some schools don't put as much into it. But fortunately, I think the Group of 5 schools and the FCS schools get that opportunity, truly embrace it and make it more than just a television program. And I think that's what's really cool to see.
One thing that feels like, and you kind of briefly touched on it, but I feel like it's underestimated, is how it kind of helps raise the academic profile of the school, just because the sheer volume of applications you're getting, and so you're able to kind of, over time, that helps raise those academic standards at the school as well.
Absolutely. And I think, well, especially in a state like Virginia, and I'm sure this is a story that's not unique around the country, where for many, many years we were said we're the little brother of schools like Virginia Tech and UVA. And even when we had success, they would say, oh, well, you're doing that at a lower level, or isn't that cute? You little JMU, congratulations, go get your participation trophy. But not only have we had game day, we've recently beat Virginia Tech. And then we beat UVA, and then you get College Game Day. It's like, what are you going to minimize now? We beat you on the field, which you said wouldn't happen. We're ranked higher than you at the time because we're in the top 25, and neither of those two programs were. And now we're having College Game Day and this showcase of what makes our program so special and so successful. And I think it's all of that combined makes students in the state who are looking at schools for a variety of different reasons, but at least JMU and Virginia Tech, very similar academic profiles. UVA, obviously a very storied academic institution, but there's a lot of decisions. And when some people go, I mean, I was one of them who's like, sports was a really important part of where I was going to go to school. And when you go, maybe I was thinking about going Virginia Tech, but because I know they have a great football program, but hey, actually the last couple of years, JMU's program has been better. Maybe I'll give more of a consideration to JMU. And I think that's what a lot of students have seen, in addition to our investment in facilities and other things. So yeah, it helps every aspect of your program. It helps with recruits. I know that was one of the biggest recruiting weekends for the previous staff, was bringing them into game day. And it just gives you an opportunity to showcase what's special at that moment in time, but also what for JMU, when you've had it multiple times and you've continued to progress through that, it wasn't just a one-off experience. That leads to sustained success in recruiting, sustained success in fundraising. That's another big piece of this. Is JMU's had some of the most successful years in their history from a fundraising perspective. So it's all about continuing momentum. And we can tell you from our basketball coaches, they said it really impacted basketball. It really impacted lacrosse and other sports, because they used it as a recruiting tool as well to their athletes that they were talking to say, hey, this is what JMU is about. Or the phrase that we've come up with at our school has really become a slogan, is we're an everything school. So it's not just about football. We're trying to really have sustained success across the board. We had our softball team in the Women's College World Series and others. So yeah, it's a rising tide, and I hope more programs get to experience it.
And you talked about being ranked in the top 25. How can you, to the people who are not there around JMU in that part of Virginia, what is that like for the diehard fans, and then grabbing that demographic that maybe is your casual fan or maybe not so casual fan, that then they're like, oh, well, what's this? And then, grabbing them.
Well, I'm going to say, for starters, I'm going to be one of those people who we got used to being ranked number 1 or number 2 in FCS, but I didn't know if we'd ever be in the top 25. I just didn't, because if you look at the programs that are typically there, it's a lot of blue bloods, and they make it hard for G5 teams to get in there. And I certainly didn't expect to see it in the first 2 years. So for me, it was an incredible moment. And I'll tell you, a lot of us got emotional because you put so much into this, especially when you host a show, and to see JMU above many of the programs that for so many years we've compared ourselves to was pretty incredible. And then to also be ranked above programs at the time like Notre Dame. And I know that Notre Dame is a phenomenal program that's done it over many, many years and has facilities and stuff. But for that moment of time, JMU was ranked above it. It was pretty exciting. But to answer your question, well, what does it do for the casual fan? There's a really simple thing that it does. For starters, if you go on the ESPN app and you want to try to find a score on a Saturday, you got to go to the Sun Belt. You got to scroll down. You got to find it. Whereas if you're in the top 25, it's on the main page of the ESPN app. It's the top 25 scoreboard that you see on the ticker. It makes its way into stadium scoreboards and in newspaper columns, and as well as the major sports talk shows that so many people watch and enjoy. So that right there, you're going to reach your casual fan, not just of your university, but casual fans of other programs and casual fans of sports in general. That's what's so great about an NCAA tournament berth in basketball, is that you're putting your name on a bracket. So anybody in your office, even if they're diehards in sports or not, is filling out James Madison this year in the NCAA tournament. The same thing comes into play on some levels when you're ranked there, because you're just getting more eyeballs. And it goes back to the conversation about game day. When these things are happening at the same time, it's a snowball effect and brings a lot of attention to your school. And that's why for it to happen in our first 2 years is pretty remarkable, and something hopefully that now the voters are very aware of James Madison. And then you think it's human nature. It makes it easier for you to get back there in the years to come.
One thing that I've been impressed with JMU and the football program in particular is, from my standpoint, they have absolutely nailed head coaching hires, right? You go from Mike Houston, who leads you guys to success at the FCS level, goes on to East Carolina. You bring in Kurt Signetti. He kind of just picks right up where Houston kind of left off. And now he's moves on to Indiana, and you're bringing in Bob Chesney over from Holy Cross. Can you kind of, number one, kind of tell us what you think are the keys to how you guys have had so much success in nailing those hires, and then kind of what you can tell us about new head coach Bob Chesney?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with our athletic director in Jeff Bourne's approach to those hires. If you look back, we started off really this arc of success with JMU was in the early 2000s with head coach Mickey Matthews. who brought JMU to its first FCS national championship in 2004, a national semifinals berth in 2008. We went into a little bit of a dark period. Then we hired an assistant coach from Ohio State, and Everett Withers winds up going on to Texas State for a brief period of time before he was let go. And now he's kind of bounced around both the NFL and the Group of Five. But after that, Jeff Bourne made a conscious decision that he wanted to hire existing head coaches who had previous success at the FCS level and had shown that they know what comes with being a head coach. Is a lot different as the head man with everything that comes with you than being an assistant. So he is focused on, from a hiring perspective, guys who had shown success at the FCS level and were building blocks towards a sustained success at the next level. So if you look at Mike Houston, what he had done before coming to JMU, Everett Withers, Kurt Cignetti, similar molds. You saw Kurt Cignetti have success at Elon and rebuilding that program, what he had done at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And now you see what Bob Chesney has done, sustained success as he's moved up. And what Bob Chesney did at Holy Cross, I think, speaks for itself, especially for a program that has some things that are put in place naturally that make it harder for them to compete. They have an academic profile that's hard to necessarily recruit to. You have to be able to, it's a Catholic school, and that is going to eliminate some players. So the fact that he was able to have success, especially with limited resources at that program, I think is something that, for when you give him the keys to a program that does have the budget like JMU, the facilities, and is poised for significant increases in investment to this program based on what's been publicly spoken about by our athletics department. It's hard to think that he would not have success. And I can tell you, this staff, from an energy perspective, and I've been around college sports and for a long time outside of my work for JMU, I personally never seen anything like it. I don't think I've ever come across a coach like Bob Chesney, just in terms of how he runs a practice. It's just a different thing to see. And from talking to the players, which I had a chance to do this weekend, was on the inside of the locker room, got a chance to be on the sidelines for the spring game. They're kind of in a whirlwind just of how much of a contrast it is to what had previously been there in terms of just a style. So I can't think of two guys who have more of a contrast in style. Kurt Cignetti comes from the Alabama school, kind of very buttoned up, very limited in terms of access and who he lets speak to the media. It's his voice and no one else's. Bob Chesney has opened the doors to this program. He had every fan in the stands come down to the field after the game. He's opened the locker room to podcasts like us, including all his players being able to have a voice, his assistant coaches having a voice. He believes that the way he has phrased it is athletics departments and programs are like a community trust, and he's just happens to be the champion of that, the steward of that at this moment. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends for this program, both in recruiting. From what we've talked to potential recruits of this, is they seem to be really buying into what he's selling from an energy and access perspective. And it's certainly paying off in terms of ticket sales and investments in this program. We sold a record number of season tickets last year. I've actually sold out of season tickets, and that's led to our university really exploring stadium expansion now. They're exploring the possibility of a new indoor practice facility as well as additional offices. So we also broke a record for our athletic fundraising this year too. So all of this success, coupled with, again, like you said, great hires, is really staging what we hope comes next, which is maintaining that in the portal era. Its investment is going to be key. That's why there's been such a big focus on our NIL collective that our podcast has a role in supporting as well.
One thing that I know you guys did for your spring game, and it seems like Bob is really kind of embracing the NIL, is the that opportunity for folks to kind of get involved in coaching the team, if you will. Tell us a little bit about that and how that went.
It was an incredible experience. And I'll tell you, if you go on our site, we can maybe post it in the chat or something. It's at jmusoundoff.com or on our JMU social media pages at JMU Soundoff. You'll see a link to a behind the scenes video that we did where two individuals, one on offense, one on defense, had the opportunity to be a coach for a day. And you'd think it would be this hokey thing where maybe they would get to call one play on a headset. Coach Chesney said, we're not going to do it that way. We're really going to give them a full experience. And it started hours before the game where they got a chance to, first of all, get swagged out like a coach would be. So they got coaching issued hats that only the coaching staff has access to. They got shirts. They got the whole 9 yards. They looked great. And then they got a chance to be in the locker room for the pregame speeches. They let each of the coaches give a pregame speech to their offense, a pregame speech to the defense. And I will say the players really embraced it. They had fun with it. But they were literally on the field with a play sheet. And one of the guys, his name is Frank Payne, who was the offensive coach today, goes to our offensive coordinator, Dean Kennedy. Yeah, I don't need this. I already drew up my plays for the day. And he said, I want to do a tight end pop pass. And Coach Chesney overheard it. And our offensive coordinator says, well, I don't know. We've got these pre-scripted. And Coach Chesney goes, no. He won the competition. We're going to draw it up. And he actually went in and said that play call is called Soda. It's he had the position group and the formation number, and it was really cool to see because Kennedy came out and he took a Sharpie and he redrew the play. And they actually wound up letting each of them call an entire series, which was amazing to see. And just again, that's about what he sees the important role of community engagement. And it hasn't just been this type of thing for the NIL collective. Each and every player at JMU who receives an NIL contribution or contract has to also do community service component to it. So my full-time job, I'm the communications director for the American Red Cross. We've had football players from this program doing PSAs and ads for blood donation in the community. They've been at the Boys and Girls Club. They've been doing some reading events around town. And this stuff was not happening prior to Coach Chesney arriving, at least at anywhere near this level. And again, he sees that as building connective tissue to the fan base. And his belief is that the more people who have an investment in this program personally and emotionally, the more they're going to buy tickets, the more they're going to show up, but the more they're just going to care about what happens. But also he believes that there's a role in that's part of keeping players at JMU. In the retention part of this is that the more connections those players have to graduates, the more connections they have to their fellow students in the community, the harder it is to leave. It's just human nature, especially if JMU is able to have a pretty robust NIL activation, and that's what we're trying to do. Are we ever going to be at the top of the P5 and NIL investment? No. Are we likely to have a deal like Memphis has now with FedEx? Probably not. But, it's a start. And I think what we've seen, though, and this is, I'm not going to get into numbers of specific players, but I can tell you for a fact that we've had players on our roster that have gotten significant NIL offers to leave JMU. And JMU's been able to give them a nice, package, nowhere near what they were offered. And that was enough to keep them. And that's because players, a lot of the times, there's been all this talk about, X player leaves for so much money. For every example of a player leaving for significant numbers, there's another group of players who had an opportunity to leave and took less to stay because they do believe in their programs and they do believe in what's happening. And I think you're going to see more of that going forward because I think, just be candid, JMU's not alone in this. There have been a number of players who have left JMU and many other G5 programs to go for the grass is greener type situations and have found it's not a better situation for them. They've gotten reduced playing time. They found out that they weren't a good fit. And I think the more that happens, the more players are going to say, okay, you know what? I want to get something. I want to be able to capitalize on the moment and what's happening. But I'd also like to stay in a program where I've had success. And that sets me up for the next level better than if I go and have to deal with transitioning and everything that comes with it.
So you talk. I'm going to couple a couple things in here and do like really, really good podcasting and ask maybe a couple questions all at once. But just days ago, JMU kind of had some things shuffle around with their AD. So I don't know if you've had a chance to really digest everything because that was 3 days ago, 4 days ago, something like that.
So literally his first time on campus was Friday. He was on campus yesterday on Saturday in terms of meeting the fan base for the first time. I had a chance to go to a private event with him on Friday. Really great guy. And what's funny is, to give you a little behind the scenes anecdote, we have Matt Roan, our new AD, coming from Eastern Kentucky. You've got Bob Chesney, who's the old guy now, feel like he's been here for years, but only started in December. And then you've got Coach Bradlin, our basketball coach, who's coming to JMU now. So two young coaches and a young AD, both with young families, who were literally around the table at this private event talking about what houses they were going to buy. They're saying, it's a limited real estate market in Harrisonburg. And saying, are you looking at this house on Mason Street? Because I'm looking at this. And you could see there was a real sense of camaraderie because they were all in a shared experience of being new guys in a program, again, that it has had a period of unprecedented success. So, we have had a chance to have a lot of change. But one thing that I think is interesting about this is the same group has been involved in the hiring process for all three of these individuals. So there was the same hiring firm There was the same set of values and the same set of attributes that I think they were going for all of them. And if you look at them, what Coach Spradlin's done in basketball, sustained success, 2 NCAA tournament appearances in the last 3 years. You see what Coach Chesney's done at Holy Cross, taking a school that for many years was really an afterthought in the FCS and made them a perennial FCS playoff team, as well as Patriot League champions multiple times over the last decade. And then you take an AD who has come from his program where he's had sustained success in both facility improvements as well as fundraising. So I think all of those things really mesh well together. I can tell you he already meshed from a culture perspective. I saw him making his way around the tailgate lots yesterday at our spring game, which we had a record turnout for as well, enjoying some of what JMU fans are known for. So I'll keep it PC on this program, but let's just say he had a very good time and I think was embraced. And one other element that I want to add to this is our soon to be Hall of Fame, at least in the JMU Athletics Hall of Fame, athletics director Jeff Bourne was intimately involved in the hiring process for his the person to replace him. He is very well known in the NCAA circles and the college athletics community. So the fact that he was heavily involved in making sure that there was continuity and making sure the same type of value structure was in place, as well as personality profile, I think bodes well for this hire being successful. But we'll see. Lots of change happening at the same time. Both creates opportunities, but it also creates risks. We also had our president transition to American University. So we named an interim president as well on Friday. So if you're stacking the announcements, it was our athletic director announced at like 9 a.m. and an interim president announced at like 9:05. So yeah, an unprecedented era of change at JMU. But it comes at a time though, where at least when you talk to the fans and the people who are on the hiring committees, there's an opportunity here with these hires to really, again, focus on the increased investment and financial support for the school. You may not know that JMU was started as a teacher college of women. It was called the State Normal School for Women when it first started. Then it became Madison College and now JMU. So we still have a younger alumni base that are now starting to enter the phase in their life where they have a little bit more disposable income. And we hope that that pays off in terms of increased investment.
Talk about like a kind of a hard reset, definitely for the football team. You got losing 98% of the production from 2023, and then new coach and new AD, and then something that
great for podcasts, lots to talk about.
Yeah, and then something that maybe not the average fan would pay attention to, but then maybe people who look a little bit deeper. But I kind of want to just make sure everybody's aware. Jeff Bourne made that hire for Bob Chesney. So
and Coach Bradley for the basketball side. So made both of those hires on the way up.
So you make those changes and you've got all this production loss and you've got an AD who didn't make those hires at some time in the next, 4 years, that rubber will probably
now I will put an interesting asterisk on this. And I'm not saying don't take this to mean more than it is, but I'm inferring strongly that it's important to know that the same hiring firm was involved in the hire of all three of these individuals. A lot of similar agents. So there's I think there was a lot more known possibly in this process than probably any of us, including myself, know. But to see how this transition has gone and to see how the reaction has been from all parties involved, and I feel like we're in a good place. That I know, and the fact that Jeff Bourne was involved in all three hires also bodes well for the future. Is he has a very close relationship with our new AD and Matt Roan, and I think that allowed there to be maybe a little less anxiety about who these hires. And I can see after seeing them all interact over the past couple of days in both public settings and private settings, my concern on that is probably next to none because I do think that they made three really incredibly smart hires when you look at their resume before coming. And again, it's different becoming an assistant, especially in the coaching realm, to being a head coach. And if you look at every stop in all of these gentlemen's past, they've had winning records and they've had incredible success, and that's why they are where they are. And I'll say they're all very ambitious coaches as well. And part of being ambitious, if you want to continue to move up, you have to have success. And I can say the same applies to our new AD. He's somebody who has climbed the ranks pretty quickly, was at Nichols, at Eastern Kentucky, only there for 4 years before he makes the jump to JMU. Of note, he also has pretty strong ties to Virginia. That's another thing to really consider. Is it something that these coaches are not unfamiliar with the area and the territory they're coming into?
So that's good to know because some places don't have a united front when they come in. So that's good kind of background knowledge to have of JMU and how they can build on this to get rebuild for this the coming years in the future, and that I would assume Jeff Bourne is only a call away, and all these ads are pretty big
Yeah.
into the uh, fundraising and
Yes.
whatnot, and helping make that become fruition. Because, like you said, JMU, over the last, Jeff Bourne's been there since '99. Like, he's been there for a while, and really helped get this program to where it is. And I think he can really help Matt continue
Absolutely.
building and making it
Although,
successful.
although Jeff has indicated he has some pretty robust plans to be in Montana fly fishing. So he said
Okay.
they may have to come get him with his waders, but he's looking forward to some time in a river. He said with no cell phone, him in nature. But I will say this: just like any other, and I want to be clear, what has made JMU successful is not anything different than many other programs, but it's also a lot of people who are not official employees who do some incredible work to make this happen. We've got a really robust and engaged alumni group, and some of those alumni are actively involved in search committees and hiring processes, fundraising. There's been a lot of continuity in that regard, in making sure that whatever AD that comes into JMU or never coaches has a pretty strong community around them of people who are very familiar with the politics of the university, very familiar with the fundraising capabilities, as well as the phone numbers and other things to talk to. So I do feel, yes, Jeff will be somebody that will be only a phone call away. He's also somebody who's made it known that he plans to come back to Harrisonburg regularly. But the NEAD, it's more about the community around them, the infrastructure at JMU, which let's be clear, that's why I believe many of these coaches who have come to JMU have been so successful, and why this continues to be a job that is highly sought after. Is if you look at the coaches who have come to JMU over the years, they've had success at JMU and haven't really had sustained success when they've left. If you look at Mike Houston, what he's had some struggles at East Carolina since he's made that transition. Everett Withers struggled when he went to Texas State. So there's been, we'll see what happens with Kurt Signetti in Indiana. But
he's facing an uphill battle for sure.
I'm going to be kind. Yeah, I think he can say Google me all he wants. I think it's
an uphill battle.
That phrase may come back to bite him another way when he's playing Michigan and Ohio State and others.
We've had some great conversation about JMU in general, but I just want to pick your brain a little bit from the spring game yesterday. So one thing that Luke and I have talked about numerous times on our other podcasts is kind of the offense that comes with Bob Chesney. And one thing that has really puzzled us both is Chesney's MO in the past has been a very mobile quarterback. And that quarterback was in the transfer portal. Did not end up following him to JMU. He's kind of committed over to UNLV. But then they bring in Dylan Morris, a former, I think he was a 4-star recruit at Washington, but he does not fit the mold of a Chesney quarterback at all. So I'm just kind of we're really interested to kind of see how that kind of got together and what it's going to look like.
And he's addressed this pretty candidly in what he says. When you get a chance to get a quarterback like Dylan Morris with the background that he has, with the pedigree, and I think something that he shared in multiple of his media opportunities is Dylan Morris, when you think about the amount of football he's played, but all the amount of football he's watched, the amount of offenses he's gone through, as Dylan shared with us yesterday in the post-spring game media availability, this is his 4th offense in college. He's like having another coach on the field. Chesney has also shown at this time at Holy Cross so that he's not afraid to bring in multiple quarterbacks during a game. And JMU has a very mobile backup quarterback who actually won the starting job out of camp last season in Alonzo Barnett, who has had, if you had to ask me today, who's had the best spring of any of the quarterbacks on campus, it would likely be Alonzo Barnett. He only got a half of football in terms of Kurt Signetti giving him about as short of a leash as you could possibly give somebody before he turned to Jordan McLeod, a move that obviously paid off for JMU. But it was really a confidence blow to Alonza, who had an absolutely remarkable summer last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a quarterback like Barnett used in some running situations, knowing that he's also a very adept passer. They also have a pretty highly touted prospect in their system called J.C. Evans from Florida, who's also a mobile quarterback as well. But also Chesney has been very clear, and Dean Kennedy has said as well, that they're going to tailor their offense to the personnel that they have. And if you look at this roster right now as it's currently formulated, and I have to put a giant asterisk on this because the roster today could look very different than the roster will on August 1st. And I'll tell you, from just the spring game alone, there were a number of people who I know Coach Chesney's very high on that aren't on campus yet. Some transfer offensive linemen they're going to be making the way over that are finishing courses at their previous institutions and will start practice in August. But this is an offense that's going to really rely on the offensive line. That's the one group that has had continuity through this transition. And this group is very, very well experienced and has shown that they can be a dominant force in the Sun Belt. And then you look at the two running back transfers that JMU brings onto their campus, who I believe personally, in Adaya Day, George Pettaway coming from North Carolina, have the potential to be really, I think, difference makers. And if you ask me, where was a position group that really disappointed last season for JMU was the running backs room. We're a program that historically has been a run first institution. In the last 2 years of Kurt Cignetti, we've really aired it out more when you have guys like Eliza Surratt and Reggie Brown and others who have really Chris Thornton, who have made success. It made sense to pass more, but I think JMU might go back more to their roots and be more of a run first team this year, especially when we did lose significant numbers of contributors on the wide receiver side. I still think if there's a position group that I'm intrigued to see what happens in the weeks to come. Does JMU go out and then find another wide receiver to kind of replace some of the production they lost? I know that there are some players on this roster they're very high on in terms of the wide receiver position. They have a transfer from Connecticut they're very high on. There's a freshman who's new to the school that had a really breakout performance in the spring game. So lots of different things to look at, but I am confident that Dean Kennedy can tailor an offense to this room and the staff that he has and the player personnel, because he's done that in the past. But it is an open question. We'll see what Dylan Morris. I think Morris is a little more mobile though than people give him credit for. The practices I went
to. But I don't think anyone expecting to rush for 1,400, 1,300 yards.
I don't think he's going to be asked. No, and
yeah.
Let's be candid. Sluka, I think, is a unique personality, is a unique quarterback type, and I'm always careful to differentiate between what's sourced and what's opinion. My opinion on this is, and I've heard this from some players on the roster, they had every opportunity to have Sluka come to JMU. It's a risky proposition though. If you look at Sluka, missed some time last year for Holy Cross, and is that type of offense sustainable at the FBS level when you're taking the shots that Sluka would likely take when he's taking those hits on a regular basis in the Sun Belt? If he goes down, then you got to reorganize your offense to try to, account for that loss. So there is some risk associated with it. I'm not saying that it's not worthy of risk, but it's something you definitely have to consider as a coach. Is if you're going to have a quarterback offense that's that focused, it has risk. And do you need to have that at a school like JMU, which has historically recruited well, and as a school who has access to the types of recruits and transfer portal options that JMU does?
And Daniel on X says, Dean Kennedy is a QB wizard who's worked with numerous NFL talents. Style shouldn't matter that much. The thing that I will just say is it seems like coaches, less so the newer coaches, but old coaches are like, this is my style. This is what we're running. I'm getting players to run my system. And then, when you have a new coach that comes in, how well you didn't recruit these guys. How well do you adapt what you want to do based off the guys that you have? And that'll tell me a lot about JMU and how good of a coach Bob Chesney is, because there are some coaches that who was it, Justice? I'm trying to think of the defense that they ran 4-3 defense, and then they switched to a 3-3-5 defense.
App State last year. It's App State.
Absolutely.
I will
And
say
then-
this though, that Coach Chesney, though, fortunately in this situation, has recruited a lot of these guys because of the number of people that left. He was able to bring in, if you look at the 2 running backs he brought in, brings in the quarterback, brings in multiple wide receivers from other institutions. So he's kind of taking a roster now, and in a short period of time has really rebuilt it in his liking and what he wants to hope to bring to, and that's before. And he prefaced this in multiple comments, so I'm not getting ahead of him. There will be roster turnover this week for JMU. There's already been a defensive lineman who put himself in the portal, who was a previous contributor for this school and was poised to be one going into the fall. And I expect to see some additional names transition out of Harrisonburg, and that's going to provide opportunity for him to further cement this roster in the way he wants to see it going into the fall.
One other spring question I had for you, and you talked about it already, is Luke and I had kind of surmised, with Dylan Morris being the quarterback there, that and Chesney's offense being so run heavy, they bring in the 2 transfers like you mentioned, Ayoade and George Petaway, that you can reasonably expect, hey, those 2 guys are going to be the ones to pick up the slack right there, because obviously Morris isn't going to rush for 1,400 yards. But between those 2 guys, was there a pecking order? Kind of, do you see these guys being like a more 50-50 kind of split? How do you kind of see that maybe shaking out here in the fall?
I'll say for me, the practices I went to a day, just pops off the screen. His burst through the line and his pedigree and what he's done is hard to overstate. I mean, he had an incredibly successful year last year. However, if you ask me who looked great in the spring game yesterday, I would say Petaway. He had some big rushes in the game that really stood out. And again, it just shows that they're going to have options. There's some other backs who have been here. Solomon Van Horst is a name that if you're a fan of JMU, you're excited to see what he had success. Some early success last year, but then had some injuries. That's really been something that he has struggled with throughout his career, is being able to stay on the field. But when he is, man, is he dynamic, especially in the return game. That's where he can really be a breakout star for this school. So I do think in an offense that I anticipate is going to run the ball a lot. You're going to probably see a good mix of both of them. And Chesney has said that he's not somebody that's going to shy away from riding the hot hand. And I think in any successful program, a running back is only 1 carry away from being on the sidelines because of a variety of different reasons. So I think this is clearly an area where if he said that he's most excited about in terms of this unit is what he has in the running back room. There's some other younger backs who are poised to make an impact as well. So I think you're going to see a heavy dose of the ground game. But also he's a program that likes to use kind of some of the short passes as an extension of the run game. He also likes to kind of give his quarterbacks opportunities to have easy completions, is the way he phrases it. So I think you're going to see a short passing game as well that's an extension of the run game. So lots of different motions. They also like to incorporate a variety of different formations. There's somebody that and this is Dylan Morris said, part of the reason why I was excited to come to JMU is he saw Dean Kennedy's offenses are very commonly from 1 week to the next, you actually see a pretty significant amount of change based on the opponent they're playing. So definitely something to watch out for.
All right, Justice, you got any more spring ball news? Otherwise, we'll kind of jump right into the schedule for 2024.
Yeah, so something we kind of thought that would be a good idea would do with our guests is kind of go through the football schedule, and we'll kind of predict some wins and losses here, and I'll keep a tally of who the guest picks and then who Luke and I pick. But yeah, so kind of how we'll do it is Jonathan, you go first, then Luke, and then me. And we'll start there. They start off their first game of the year at Charlotte.
Yeah, and I know this is an exercise in fun, but it's impossible to know at this point. I have no idea what Charlotte's roster is going to look like just as much as JMU, but I'm going to, we're going to have some fun, so I'll have some fun with the picks. I am somebody who is not going to believe Charlotte can beat JMU until they do it. This program every year says they're going to be more than they are, and I think this will be a 1-0 opportunity for JMU. We're going to have a huge crowd of JMU fans at that game. Charlotte is one of the areas that has one of the larger JMU populations in it. It's an easy drive for JMU fans for Virginia. So I will say the Dukes will get the victory, and it will be a comfortable win on the road at Charlotte.
I think week 1, it's Saturday, August 31st. It'll be warm.
It will be very warm.
I think Bob Chesney makes a statement, comes in a cutoff tells Biff, like, this is how you wear a
I will
cutoff.
say he does. I seen him yesterday. He is somebody who's more inclined to the form fit polo shirt. I'll just say, if you check out some videos, he is definitely into fashion.
Okay, but he's making a statement. He's coming in the cutoff. He's like, this is how you wear a cutoff, and yeah, they come in to UNC Charlotte and get a win.
Love it.
I'm not going to buck the trend here. I think JMU will get the win. Charlotte, they've been, and we talked about it in our news section. They've the last 2 years of Biff there, they've really, brought in a lot of those P5 and Power 4 transfers. So, but we really haven't seen that, the results of that on the field yet. And I'm kind of inclined with you, Jonathan. I want to see it first before I believe it. So yeah, I'm going to pick JMU as well.
Great.
All right. Next is their first home game of the year against Gardner-Webb.
Yeah, be a big crowd, sellout crowd, a lubricated crowd, as I'll say. JMU gets a comfortable win against their FCS opponent. The beauty of just coming from the FCS is it makes it, I guess, a lot less likely that you're going to take that FCS opponent for granted. You might have to wait a little while for JMU programs to forget what it's like to play good FCS competition. But I think JMU does get the win against Gardner-Webb to go to 2-0.
I'm going to say first home game of the year. We got to bring in the attitude, got our offensive line. We're going to run the ball down your throat. And this game is going to be a big game for the rushing department. And I think that's how they win this game, to get off to a big start here in the first half. And they roll with that running game, and they go to 2-0.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you guys. 2-0 for JMU to kind of start the year. Now I think maybe things might get a little bit interesting. They go to the P4 and they play at North Carolina.
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, this will be for me. The ACC games have been tough for JMU in the past. They've always played them well. If you go back and look at the history between JMU playing, whether it's Virginia Tech, UVA. So our last two ACC games in Tech and UVA were wins. They've played North Carolina close in the past. I have to be honest, I haven't started my preseason research yet on UNC. But it's always going to be a tough game on the road. The reason these wins mean so much is because, they're going to be an underdog, and they should be going into UNC. I'm going to say, while it's close, and I used Bob Chesney's experience last year against Boston College, kind of lost a heartbreaker to them. JMU, wins a game that, let's be candid, against UVA. If there's no thunderstorm, they're losing that game against Virginia. I don't know how closely you guys followed it, but that game was going about as south as the game could go. There's a lightning delay. JMU's able to regroup. UVA must have thought the game was over. JMU comes out after the break and gets the win. Almost blew it at the end on a variety. They almost got a ball intercepted on a 2-point conversion that would have been returned for 2 points that would have cost them to lose the game. So these are tough games, especially in a year where they've lost so much in terms of production. I'm going to pick UNC in this game. JMU goes to 2-1.
All right, North Carolina defense sucks. We see, they let up 40 points to App State. I think it was just a year ago in the fourth quarter. Just wild. I think the interesting thing about UNC is going to be, who's that quarterback? Is it Connor Harold, who's kind of more of that mobile guy? Is it the transfer they brought in, Max Johnson, which they just wanted him so they could get the brother to play tight end? Let's be honest, that's all they wanted. I'm going to go with this game is actually probably closer, but because James Madison doesn't pass as efficient in this game, they will lose. But I think the best thing that they have going for them is that game started this spring. You had 15 practices to get to gel together. You've got North Carolina probably trying to figure out what they're going to do. You've got rumors of Amari and Hampton maybe going to getting some bag offers to go to Miami here and there. So what does that team really look like? Have they figured out an offensive line? Maybe this is a chance you're playing early and they haven't figured everything out, and you could maybe sneak a win. But I don't think so. I'm going to go with North Carolina in this one.
I'm going to be the contrarian, I think. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's a great opportunity for JMU to kind of get that win at Carolina with so much change there. Their defense hasn't been good in the past. They lose the leader of that defense is Cedric Gray. Like you said, they lose Drake May. By the time this game is played, O'Marion Hampton could be moved on. As much as it might pain me to say this, I'm going to give the win to JMU.
Okay. I will say this: that game will not be decided until late in the fourth quarter, one way or the other. If you go back and look,
it'll be a good one. I think
it'll be a good one. And it'll be a good game you can take on hand.
And I think it might even take a half before Mac Brown even realizes what's going on in the game.
I think that's
and
valid.
then, he's been coaching for so long. I think he's we love Mac Brown. Love Mac Brown. I grew up watching the remember that championship game against USC. But yeah, he might not even have a plan together. He might overlook. I don't know who they have the week after, but
Yeah.
All right.
Go Tar Heels.
Next up for home game number 2, they bring in somebody from the MAC, and that's Ball State.
Yeah, I think this is, if you just look at the history of JMU at home, we don't lose at home very often, and when we do, it's usually to a big rival or something. So I think if you look at Ball State's lineup and what they're poised to bring back, I just think this is a win for JMU in Harrisonburg. It's just tough to go on the road and beat a team like JMU. Now you're coming off the UNC game. That's always something to see is what is your health and your depth look like after a P5 game. So, if there's an opportunity for Ball State, maybe they start strong, but I just think JMU is going to be too much at home in this MAC battle. We did well in the basketball court against the MAC schools this year, and I think that continues on the football field.
All right. Let's hear. This is at James Madison. Ball State and the Fighting Tanner Kozals don't have enough in them to win this one. They do lose a lot, I think, in the offensive line department. They lose their best rusher from 2023, and who is that?
Marquez Cooper.
Marquez Cooper. I just don't think they've got enough, and JMU wins this.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to agree with you. Go with JMU. Ball State's going to be starting a, redshirt freshman Caden Samanza at quarterback. He did play 4 games last year, but that's kind of really the only experience he has. So yeah, I'm going to have to go with JMU at home. All right, their first conference road game, and that's at the UL Monroe Warhawks.
Yeah, and this will be the first time in program's history that JMU actually goes out and plays at Louisiana Monroe. So I think this will be a game that many fans are kind of looking at is to say, hey, let's make our first road trip of the year. Look, they had a real rough year last year, 0-8, 2-10. What are they going to be able to do in terms of rebuilding that roster to compete with the JMU? Again, the beauty of the Sun Belt, from top to bottom, this conference, you can see these teams that are at the bottom flip-flop, especially in the portal era. But until you see it on paper and until we see more in August, I think if you're a betting person, you got to go with JMU at least now. Again, I want to be very fair to these Sun Belt teams who have also seen incredible roster turnover just like us. Sometimes it works. But I think, if you're, which we are in April, you got to pick JMU in this game.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with JMU. I don't have anything clever here or anything other than, I think the hardest part is just going to be getting jacked up to play that away game. If they don't come jacked up, I think that this is a slip up game because the next week you got Coastal Carolina, and that's a big game. So I like the Dukes in this one, but I can see that one being a slip up game.
Yep. UL Monroe, got a new head coach as well. It seems like, they don't have necessarily the resources like some of the other Sun Belt teams do. And hopefully they can get things turned around down there. But yeah, I'm going to have to go with JMU as well. All right. Next, their first kind of like big Sun Belt test, and that's against East foe Coastal Carolina.
Look, I hope you've seen tonight that I'm a pretty careful guy. I don't tend to be very hyperbolic. It's not my style. But I might break the rules for one program. We own Coastal Carolina up to this point. I'm just going to read some statistics. Our last 3 games against Coastal Carolina, 45-10, 47-7, and 56-14 on the road at Coastal. Until this program shows us that they're not a fraud, which I believe they are, there's just not a lot of love here between these. So if there's any bragging moments. I have a lot of respect for all the programs in the Sun Belt. I have a little less for Coastal Carolina. I think JMU continues that trend at home in front of a crowd that will have some really creative signs in the stands. There's just not a lot of love between these programs, and I think it continues with another win for JMU.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have all the traditions down, but after every touchdown, there's something that JMU does. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a cannon, and then we have a train whistle. So if you're not familiar with campus, there's a train tracks that go right through the center of campus, so much so that it routinely will keep you from making your class. So yeah, those are our two. And then we have streamers that will come down. So against Coastal Carolina, we've all run out of streamers. So yeah.
And the streamers, it does not matter if you are home or away.
Well, no, so it's only JMU. Yeah, we throw them everywhere. So we're kind of annoying. We've made some enemies because I guess, man, you'd think we were throwing bricks, but yeah, and if you saw Coastal Stadium last year, which emptied out at the end of the first quarter, there were a lot of streamers on everything. So I guess they want us to pay the cleaning bill.
Was that the game that you guys got the warning? I thought there was one road game where there was a warning about throwing the streamers, but
yeah, it's been a consistent theme. So we get it a lot. But yeah, Coastal made a little. They were throwing our fans out of the stands, who relished in the moment because you could just kind of walk around the side and there's like a chain link fence. You could still watch through.
I've been there many times.
We were up pretty big when it happened, and so they warned us, but their police had some fun with it as well. So,
well, the tables have turned. Coastal Carolina comes out, and I think Coastal Carolina and the Fighting Tim Becks in I think this is year 2 for Tim Beck. Maybe gets a couple guys that are more in that playing style that he wants to create, and I'm going to go with the upset there and Coastal Carolina.
There you go.
Gets a win there.
I'm going to pick JMU. I will say if the game was in Myrtle Beach, I probably would go with Coastal Carolina. I think, it's gonna be a close game, but I'll give the home edge to JMU.
Justice, aren't you an ODU alumni?
What
are you doing?
We haven't talked about ODU yet. I have a tremendous amount of respect for their program. We'll get to them.
There's a method to my madness, Luke. We'll get there, Luke.
All right.
I may surprise you with my pick in that game, though. So.
Next up, at Georgia Southern.
Look, this is a game that if you were to ask me to, I mean, obviously I picked a loss against UNC, but this is a game that just scares me because the matchup has not seemed to be great between JMU and Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is a team that's shown that they can throw the ball. And if there's a way you've beaten JMU the last couple of years is being really able to air it out and test these young corners. Now, I know JMU seems to be very excited about what they're bringing back in the secondary. We had about as big of a shootout as you could possibly have the last time we went down to play Georgia Southern on the road. This is one that is probably going to be the hardest one for me to pick on this Sun Belt schedule. I wish I could see more about the roster. This is a pick'em game. I'm a JMU podcast, so I got to know my listener base. I'm going to pick JMU by 3 in this game, in a game that really goes down to the wire. But I want to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for this program and their fan base, and they created a real electric atmosphere the last time we went down there.
All right. Well, Georgia Southern, up and down season last year. Based off of what I've done here, JMU has 4 wins. Which last year Georgia Southern had a strict rule. Hey, do you need your 6th win? Do you need a bowl? We will give that to you. We will lose to you. We will give you that bowl. They were like Oprah Winfrey. It's like, all right, you're in the bowls. You're in the bowl. You're in the bowl. Well, this would be just for win 5. So no bowl with 5 wins. So I'm gonna go with Georgia Southern with the win in Saturday, October 19th at Statesboro.
To Jonathan's point, if I felt Georgia Southern had a capable quarterback that could lead the passing attack we've seen the last 2 years, I would probably pick them. Yeah. But, they're down to J.C. French and Dexter Williams. It's kind of their quarterback competition. Now, but they both offer something a little bit different. They're both a little bit more mobile options than what Georgia Southern has had in the past. So I'm not sure that passing game is going to be as potent as it has been. And so once again, I'm going to go with JMU. Next up, Southern Miss.
I don't want to belabor this one. This is home, a team that has done some good things in the recruiting game. I'll give credit to Southern Miss for what they're doing in terms of roster management. I'm just going to use the same criteria as I've used before. I think it's hard to beat JMU in Harrisonburg. This game is, what is it? October 26th. So you'll probably have a Halloween theme inside Bridgeport Stadium, which tends to bring out a big crowd. I'll pick the Dukes in this one of the game that JMU wins by at least 14.
Whew. All right. The Golden Eagles, I think this defense might be one of the better defense in the Sun Belt. And if you don't know much about the Golden Eagles, listen to the G55 on Monday, 9 o'clock. We will do a talk there with Southern Miss.
Yeah, tomorrow 8 a.m. it releases. So yeah, good segue there.
There you go. Nice. That's nice promo.
Promote there. I am gonna go with the Golden Eagles in this one, and I think it's gonna come down to that defense holding. Because if I remember right, they were really high on their defensive line, and I think JMU is gonna try to run the ball, and I don't think they're gonna be as successful running the ball. So that's why I'm gonna go. It's gonna come down to that trenches, and it's gonna come. So I'm gonna go with the Golden Eagles in this one.
There you go.
I'm going to go with JMU. I mean, I think while Southern Miss might have a good defense, I don't know that I have high expectations for their offense. You know, they lose Frank Gore Jr. They're kind of the focal point of their offense. They do return Drake Clark, who I think is a fine running back. But I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to kind of score with JMU. So I'm going to go with Southern Miss. Next up, Georgia State.
Look, Georgia State's a team in transition as well. Lost a lot to the portal. On the road again at JMU. I almost want to speed past this because I'm so excited about the next 3 games. I think JMU wins this comfortably at home. Again, in Bridgeport Stadium. This is a November game. It might be a little chilly in Harrisonburg. Yeah, it's a win for the Dukes against Georgia State in a game that I feel will be a comfortable win for JMU.
And let's just move on just as fast as Georgia State's head coach moved to South Carolina to be their tight ends coach. James Madison wins this one, but I do believe that Dell McGee is building something special there. It will take time. It sounds like they are really recruiting that metro Atlanta area way heavier. If you're not familiar, Dell McGee comes from Georgia, the University of Georgia. He comes there. It doesn't sound like they've recruited Atlanta very well, and he's really hit that hard. So it'll take some time, but not year one.
Yeah, Georgia State's one of those teams that it's going to have a lot. It's going to look a lot different today than they will in August. They have a lot of turnover. Like you said, they lost their coach kind of mid-spring camp off to South Carolina, bring in Dell McGee, and so. While like Luke alluded to, we're kind of excited about what he can do for Georgia State. I do think it'll be a rough year one for those guys, and so I'll go with JMU.
Can I say one nice thing about Georgia State? Because their fans took it on the chin a little bit too much on Twitter last year with people making fun of their stadium. I went down to that game last year. I thought it was actually a great atmosphere to watch a college football game in. I mean, yes, they didn't have the fan support that maybe you'd like them to see, but for people blasting Turner Field like it was some disaster and a terrible place to watch a game, I thought that was really unfair. And I thought it was just one of the more enjoyable games that I had the ability to attend, and it was great because there were a lot of Harrisonburg wearing purple fans in the stands. But yeah, let's lay off their stadium. It wasn't that bad.
All right, like Jonathan said, now I think we get to kind of a really interesting part of the schedule here. These last 3 games. Next up is at Old Dominion.
Look, I do think ODU is poised to be a really good team this year. If I'm just being an honest observer, they should have won the game in Harrisonburg this past season. JMU was very fortunate with the momentum kind of shifted late in the game to get that win. However, I'm just going to be honest. If There's something about playing in Norfolk where I think we just get a huge JMU crowd. We kind of took over the stadium last time. And if I don't pick JMU in this game, I might not have a podcast anymore. So I'm going to pick JMU in our rivalry game. That's shout out to Zach Price when he was listening, and one of our listeners. And if I picked ODU, I might not make it through the night. So a very, very close game and a game that is great for Virginia. I want to say this is my asterisk to this conversation. We haven't had a chance to talk about what it's been like to be in the Sun Belt for JMU. Part of the reason we were excited to make this move to this conference is because of this stretch of games right here. A lot of respect for ODU, a lot of respect for this rivalry and what it's going to mean for the future. The Sun Belt is better when ODU is a successful program, both in football and basketball. And I'm hoping just for good games between these two programs for years to come, because there should never have been a period of time when ODU and JMU weren't playing on the field together. It's just good for all parties.
All right. Saturday, November 16th. Justice, I'm sure he will be there, but there will just be so much. But there will be so much confetti. Justice won't even be able to see the game. James Madison goes in there, gets win 6. They become bowl eligible. And, this one might be a little bit closer, but then, Old Dominion starts seeing ghosts. They start seeing Western Kentucky over there, and they blow it. And, we're going to go James Madison in this one. Did that hit too close to home, Justice?
Oh, man, oh, God, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen it worse. I don't know. It was just terrible. It was terrible. It's I've talked ad nauseum about that bowl game. I was there in person, and you just kind of saw it. It just, I don't know. I hate to
believe you let a tight end throw that many yards.
I hate to talk bad about the coaching staff, but it almost seemed like we were coaching to not lose instead of coaching to win, and that's a recipe for disaster. But let's get past that, all right? Luke kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but, there was a method behind my madness. According to what I predicted, JMU is going to come to Norfolk undefeated, 10-0. And I think, like Jonathan said, we were in the game last year, had a great chance to win the game. With the game being at Norfolk this year, I'm going to go with ODU and kind of giving JMU the first loss of the year.
Okay.
This is
next
wild.
up.
Okay, if you're going to be at the game, though, we got to find a way.
I will be at the. I'll be at the game. I'm at every single game.
It'll be a pregame podcast from the crowd.
Absolutely, we need to. We'll need to get up with the Monarchist guys.
We've done some great stuff with them.
They're in the same tailgate lot that I'm in. So yeah, awesome. we'll have to figure out something to do there.
Awesome.
So next up at App State.
Look. This is I know I have to make a prediction because it's the game that we're playing, but one thing I do know is just go back in the history of JMU and App State. Every single time we play, it is a game for the ages. It's a game that you're going to talk about for years to come. This season's game was no different than that. In an outcome that was very much in doubt until the absolute end. As that game went into overtime, you look at the first game that JMU plays in FBS against App State. We get down big, come back, and get a big win at the end to get our first really kind of milestone win at the FBS level. You go back to 2008. JMU goes down 21-0, comes back and wins in what to me personally is the greatest sports event I've ever attended. So this game will be close. It will go down the end. It won't matter what the records are. I'm going to pick JMU just because I think we're going to get revenge. And I don't know if any of these programs are going to win 2 games against each other in a row. I just think that this is a rivalry that is what is so special about the Sun Belt. And I believe over time it's going to develop into one of the top rivalries in all of the Group of 5 and really all of college football. It's just a matchup of 2 schools that are very similar in the makeup of them. They both, the mountains and the valleys and everything comes between it, and a program that everyone in Harrisonburg has a tremendous amount of respect for. So if there are App State fans listening, we're so happy to be in the Sun Belt because we get to play in the same conference as you. And this is a game that everyone has circled and a game that no one in JMU purple or App State black and gold will miss.
This is in Boone, North Carolina. You got The Rock. Okay? This is going to come down to App State and the Fighting Joey Aguilars throwing to Caden Robinson. time after time, and App State wins in not a close one. I don't know what you're talking about, Jonathan. We got App State beating James Madison Saturday, November 23rd, right before Thanksgiving. Good luck enjoying your Thanksgiving after that loss.
Okay.
Saturday, November 23rd. It's also my birthday, and I think App State's going to give me a gift there too by beating JMU. You talk about JMU kind of struggling there from the passing game perspective, and I think App State's going to be one of the tops in the Sun Belt, and certainly one of the favorites to win the Sun Belt East. So I'm going to have to go with that Joey Aguilar to Caden Robinson connection there and go with App State for the win.
And again, to be clear, when I say we're going to struggle against the pass, I have absolutely no idea because we are going to have a completely different roster. So who knows what's coming back? And our coaching staff seems to feel really good about our secondary. But maybe that's the beauty for podcasts, is that since there is so much roster turnover, we have a lot to talk about in August because no one knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks. So App State passing game make look really good until it doesn't. The same about JMU secondary. So I guess we'll see.
Absolutely.
Lots to analyze.
The one thing I am curious about, and maybe when we talk more App State games here, is they've got about, I think, 3 or 4 really good running backs there that do things differently. And we have talked to App State Mania again. The G5 Hive, go catch that on YouTube. They talked about kind of going with a hot hand approach and kind of whatever's working, because not every guy does the same thing, and that in itself can be hard to get ready for. So yeah, we'll see how App State looks this year, but I'm gonna go, like I said, with them this week.
All right, final game and final home game of the year for JMU, and the Marshall Thundering Herd come to town.
I can't talk about Marshall without talking about our friends in the College Huddle with the Thundercast. The nicest guys in the podcast game. We went up to Marshall this past season. They hosted us for a pregame broadcast. We look forward to returning the favor when that podcast comes to Harrisonburg. We're going to do a big tailgate, big sponsored event for fans of both programs. And I just want to say, we had about as unbelievable an experience as you could have going to Marshall. Their fans were incredibly welcoming. So I want to be very clear, as we're a G5 school, not a podcast right now, talking about the whole G5 landscape. And I want fans of any Marshall program to know just how much we enjoyed the trip and just how much we enjoyed their hospitality. We're going to return it. So if you're a Marshall fan who's thinking about making the trip to Harrisonburg, know you're going to be welcomed and you're going to have a great experience, at least when you're in the Sun Belt Sound Off Podcast tailgate zone. So this one, Marshall's had a lot of turnover. There's been some just weird things happening with that program. I don't know. There seems to be an interesting vibe there. Some of the offseason kind of controversies around them, the quarterback that transferred. And I just think when you look at the rosters right now on paper, again, at this moment in time, the game is in Harrisonburg, end of the year. I think this is a win for JMU and a good way to wrap up the season in front of what will be another big crowd in Harrisonburg. But it will be a game that will have moments of doubt for both programs, because I think it's just a Sun Belt rivalry game, and you never know what's going to happen when that team comes across the mountain from West Virginia into Harrisonburg.
All right, Marshall comes in to Harrisonburg, Virginia. They bring that drone that got them in trouble at home. It comes zooming in, and somebody shoots it down.
If I'm being sanctioned, if all it is like a stern warning, I'm doing that every single game, because that was amazing.
That was a pretty sweet video. That was pretty awesome. So they're trying to cheat. They're trying to get everything they need, but it doesn't matter. That I don't know what they call it now. They brought in that offense is going to look different. I don't know what to expect, but I think it's going to struggle, and I think Marshall more so uses this as a building block for the coming years as to this is who we are, what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to be throwing the ball a lot. So we will see how that goes. But James Madison sticks it to the Thundering Herd here and ends the season on a high note, giving them 7 wins on the season.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Marshall, they're kind of changing their offensive identities, moving from a team that likes to run the ball to a team that wants to kind of be an air raid, with Seth Dogie coming in there as the offensive coordinator. But I think they're going to go through some growing pains this year, and I'm going to have to go with a JMU for the win. So
awesome.
That's going to kind of.
Here's my wrap up for this schedule. It's a gauntlet for any podcast host. So it's we got to train too. We got to lubricate the pipes. We got to stretch, because when you get to that final game of the season, it gets a little challenging.
Yes. Definitely want to thank you coming on, Jonathan. I know we went a little bit longer than we anticipated, but I know from my perspective, it's been a great conversation. So definitely want to thank you for coming on. And if you want to let the folks know one more time, kind of if they're looking for more JMU content, where they can find you.
Yeah, it's at JMU Soundoff on all your major social platforms as well as podcast providers. And I just want to say this is what's great about this new partnership in the College Huddle is getting to have these conversations with like-minded voices who are also passionate about their various programs and excited for the partnership opportunities. Are there any other podcasts listening out there? Any of the guys of our Soundoff team would love to be a part of your shows because, again, it's a rising tide. Excited for what you guys are doing. So congratulations on the College Huddle. Congratulations on what comes next for all of us. And this is an exciting time for all of us in the Group of Five, and excited to watch all of your content and all the other podcasts that are a part of this partnership. It's going to be a great time.
All right. And after all that, and you still want more G5 football content, we encourage you to go check out our other G5 football podcast YouTube show, the G5 Hive at G5 on X. We are currently producing our Worker Bee series where we deep dive into the landscape of the G5 college football teams with the folks that know the teams the best. We interview beat reporters, super fans, school podcasts, and even student reporters to get all the skinny on the G5 teams they cover. The interviews take place after spring camp is finished, and several episodes are available now on the G5 Hive on YouTube channel and in podcast form on Apple and Spotify. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like button as well as subscribe button, and make sure you subscribe to the College Huddle. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review and subscribe. With that, we wish you that all your field goals be right down the middle and that your favorite team always gets that W. Until the next time, we are the G5 Huddle, and thank you for your support.